Hey there, everybody. Thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Today I'll be taking a look at two books, mostly this book, The Domesticated Afterlife, but these are both by Scott Finch. Scott was kind enough to send these along. He hit me and Sean up and, sent these along to me for free, so really appreciate that, Scott. And I really enjoyed both of these books. Obviously, not knowing Scott or his work, I was unsure of what I was getting. And both of these books really were compelling to me for different reasons. Travel diary, he has an explanation of what it was, but it was like he had done some diary, while he was traveling, and then cut and pasted them and put these things together into this diary format here, or this like comic format, these abstract compositions. This one is pretty much just a visual treat. And what I really like about it is the lines and the colors, but also I think this is the first time I've seen really hardcore poetics of form, but with also representational stuff. A lot of times when I'm seeing that poetics of form, like repetitions of shapes and stuff over time and space in comics, it seems more like purely non-representational. To have it presented in this abstract figurative form is really interesting. So what I'm talking about is you'll get like these repetitions of these shapes. He's taken these things that he's sketched once and is putting them together in different combinations. And so you can see that throughout. I picked up on that pretty quickly as I was reading this and was really enjoying that. And you're basically looking at how memory can I think that's what's going on, is how memory can kind of jumble up, and you can start juxtaposing different bits of your trips with other part of it. And as you start to do that, you like reassess the trip, you recontextualize your understanding of the trip. Like here, the dog's standing, here it's laying over, but it's the same drawing of the dog, obviously, and it looks perfectly natural in both. It's standing up and laying down. So that's really compelling to me. And then, yeah, just like the flow of the compositions and the use of color, the repetitions of the image, just build up over the book to create, I have no idea what was going on this trip, but there's like a mood and a vibe to it. So I find this to be like really obviously challenging work, but really sophisticated too. And I really enjoyed this piece. And then the other book, The Domesticated Afterlife, when I first started reading this, I was a bit confused about what I was reading, and I was thinking, I don't know about this. And then as it went, I really started to feel like I was having a conversation with this book, and that it was like a sister piece or a cousin piece to a lot of my interests and a lot of what was behind the Hodtech stuff that I was doing in Abolition of Man, and just thoughts that I've had over the last however many years, and really got into the book. And I think I need to go back and read it like twice in a row, because it has kind of a cyclical structure built into it, which is why I felt a little bit lost at the beginning. And I think that was intentional, that these characters are put into this odd situation and they're kind of finding their way out, and it has that structure of reality about it, that you kind of get dumped in as a kid and you got to figure it out. And then even this saying like it is what it is as chapter 2. Let me see, I don't remember what a bargain is struck. Okay, no, but that is what it is, like, seems right. Like, this is just what it is, and you got to deal with it and figure it out. So I didn't pick up on the characters' names because it took me a while to identify who they were, and I'm not sure that they even get names until later on. But what you have is like these animal characters that had been domesticated in real life, and it what I got by the end of the book is that they had killed a chicken or something like that, and anyways, they're in the afterlife, and the afterlife is this big boat here that they have to go on to, and it's this very like bureaucratic nightmare prison afterlife that they live in. What really kept me going with this book is pretty early on, they have this big chicken character, Sarf. He's the big boss of this like corporate afterlife that they're in. And there's this big poster that says there's always something new under the sun. And the big slogan that I used in Hodtech was, in a world where there's nothing new under the sun, choose to change the sun. And so just that interest in that same quote, there's nothing new under the sun. And we're both manipulating that in some way is like, okay, this guy's onto something. And I also noticed that there's like these what looks like sigils in there, which is something, we probably both got that from Grant Morrison, I'm not sure. But this interest in mysticism, the occult, chaos magic, sigilization, it was like, okay, I'm starting to smell something here. I'm still not sure exactly what I'm reading, but it's like that mixed with that kind of Brazil vibe that I was going for in Hode Tech that I always imagine. It just seemed to start to be speaking to me. And then there's just some really compelling visuals in here as well, even though I think the finish is a little crude. Like the visuals themselves, the imagination behind the visuals is really, really impactful. And you have this character here remembering, it looks like, the sin that he committed in life, which was raiding the chicken coop. And they talk a lot about, this is the domesticated afterlife, and the animals are talking a lot about the sin that they committed by letting themselves being domesticated. And I think that, carries on to a critique of humanity as well, obviously, in these things. And the further you go in, the more I start seeing, okay, these occult archetypal dream type of states. He's to have this big wheel of life that they're going around on, and it just so happens to go up. He releases the waters from the gap and contorts the wheel. Though the car stalls, I push it up this strange new contour. As my backseat companions pull from behind the car, I can't see anything. And then they go up onto like the shadow on the moon here, and they curve up onto the crescent of the moon, and that takes them onto this other spiral. So it's like breaking the cycle, breaking the wheel, I think, but it's also the Nautilus shell built into there. So you're talking about the golden spiral or Fibonacci sequences or something. There's just a lot to unpack in this book. And I read it through once, and like I said, I probably need to read it through once and then loop back, and then I think I would really, really get it. But on a first glance, there's a lot of depth in this, and I know I'm missing out on a lot of it. Here's another, I think, where he just starts going really, really deep, kind of philosophically. This character is washing dishes, and he starts questioning himself. He thinks he hears a voice mocking him for thinking he's busy. He thinks he's thinking that he hears a voice mocking him for thinking he's keeping himself busy. He thinks he's a he. He thinks he thinks. He thinks that his thinking can contain the he that he thinks does the keeping of being busy, that's possessed by a he that he thinks is a he. And it's just that type of, when you first get into philosophy and you start having these questions, you can really just go down these endless rabbit holes of questioning too much. And then this character says, what is this series of critiques? No matter what I do, say, or think, it all rushes in to dissolve all underlying assumptions until there's nothing left. Even these words I spell out now are taken apart one letter at a time. So it's not even Cartesian skepticism. It's like probably something like Derrida, just collapsing all of reality as being able to be made sense of at all. And so this character is going through that. And I think that's what this is. This is a full birth to Christ, existential crisis to solution, and then back again type of thing. There's these amazing sequences here that are like these dream sequences that really seem to be tapping into some kind of collective subconscious, where there's just all of this imagery that piles up, and you even have like ancient scribes in here and some things that look almost kind of Egyptian in their hierarchical designs. They seem to take on like petroglyphs, so this is like feels very taking in the whole world and looking for some kind of collective, some subconscious truth. And like I said, the compositions on these are awesome, even though like the drawing of the dog's not the best drawing of the dog. Like here's this Egyptian stuff. So compositionally, I find this to be really, really compelling work. And the finish doesn't even matter to me at all. Here you get a better explanation of Suncor, which is led by this Sarf character, and that seems quite a bit like the Hode Tech that I came up with. And then Sarf is pretty similar in nature to my imaginary guy that runs Hode Tech. And then he's talking about that the goal of this Suncorp is to provide a steady supply of novelty. Now, in this case, Sarf is coming up with inventions, things for people to buy that are keeping them novel, whereas in Hode Tech, the novelty was just kind of incessant new content. But it seems to be, this is where I was really like, oh man, okay, like, yeah, I was right. This is some kind of cousin to me intellectually. I really feel like we're worried about the same concerns, and maybe that's what Scott saw, why he sent this over, is he had seen that in just the videos we do or something. I don't know, but I appreciate it, Scott, and I really do feel like me and you have been processing a lot of the same stuff, and it's coming out in really different ways, but there's links between it. So I really enjoy that. And then they're talking about this shoe stone, our own Magus Carson has, or Kashan, sorry, I pronounce it like my own name. In this world, it is a key, but in the world above, it is the fruit of a flowering tree, cut to stock footage of Kashan. And this is then the Kashan using this. And then you go back to this like Aleister Crowley image here, and it says, today this stone is truly the key to unlocking our cascade of passing consumer fancies. Perhaps someday when we've left the snakes and ladders of life, death, and rebirth, the fruit will satiate us all. And that landed for me pretty heavily too, because of that recent rant I had about trees and snakes, and that the key is like the fruit of the tree, and that really what we're being distracted by is this continual passing, the snake, the linear, like things are just kind of passively always moving by you on this conveyor belt of consumerism. And he ties that to snakes and ladders, and I think that's right, that you're always like progressively climbing and chasing something, and that you're not seeing the expansional growth of a tree, which the end result is the flower. That's the flowering of the tree produces the fruit, and the fruit is the key. And so that made a lot of sense to me. And I don't know how explicit that all is for Scott, or if this is all intuitive for him. This book really feels like it all, downloaded in one evening of revelation to him. It has that kind of structure to it. So I don't know if he's as explicit about that as I have become, but I really, and there's something else with stuff like this, like people are going to map what they want onto it, but I just kept finding those similarities between our thoughts, I think. And I'm going to go down the rabbit hole like that character. Here's another really great composition here. This is another piece of writing that I really like. We keep the darkness out, and we keep our flock in well-lit, safe spaces. That is the impetus for the entire airtight built environment. But I guess sometimes that air gets stale. What do you do then? The walls have to be permeable enough to let the goodies in, and solid enough to keep the naughty darkness at bay. I don't know what that means. And I think that's exactly right. He's basically talking about society, that you've got to have some revivification every now and then, some new influences, but if you let too much in. And also talking about sensory perceptions, right? Sensory perceptions are membranes, and if you don't have a porous membrane, a permeable enough membrane, nothing gets in. But if your membranes are too porous, then everything gets in, and it'd be either viral infection or information overload or whatever. So that seems to be a very, very, very deep truth right there, just in 3 panels. Here, then I saw the sigilization for the first time, where they take this character's name, Aeneid, and they compress it to one sigil, and you can look at it. And this is funny because this is exactly the type of thing I was doing in my early 20s. I was making stuff like this, but this sigil that he's put right here, it's formed out of the E, the N, the A, the I, and then this is the D right here. And that's like, if I would have had to do that name, I would have done it almost exactly the same, except the way Grant Morrison talks about it, you take out the vowels. So I guess it would have only been the N and the D, but he's obviously keeping all 3 of them in. I'm not sure where he learned this idea of sigilization from, but that's it. Then I can see it right there. And it's like, if I had those letters, that's probably exactly how I would do it. And then I also saw, obviously, it looks like it spells AI. So it's another one of those things where I just felt like, oh shit, this book is like I almost feel schizophrenic, like I'm making this book up as I'm reading it. Another schizophrenic moment is this Abraxas be praised. This is every time Tori gets in the car and links her phone, she's linking to Abraxas. I don't know why she chose that name. She's described it to me. It's some character she has some reason for having her own mythological connection to, but she always names her phone that. So that's in my car as the Bluetooth for her phone, and that was a bit creepy to me. And then right here, there's some cool formal stuff where there's all these letters here, but you're getting Abraxas spelt over and over again. and then they're playing it like a game. So there's like this video game structure in here that comes back as a metaphor now and again. And then right here, these characters, like the lettering on them it looks intentionally weird. That was just like a fun little formal moment. So a lot of cool comics formalisms. Here we have this interesting dissolution of ego kind of moment here where they eat this fruit and they're all looking at themselves in the mirrors, and then they all start seeing through the mirrors and reaching through the mirrors to each other, and all becomes one. So they're obviously like headed towards the Godhead in here. I really like this part too because of the interest in the suns that we seem to share. Is they set up this environment where we depend not on our sun in the big blue sky, but upon a canine sun god who turns the sunlight on or off with a switch. So that's like humans with their lights turning off and on and removing us from reality. They exchange our songs, dances, and arts of courtship for trivial entertainment. And I think that gets at the root of like me wanting to change the sun, choose to change the sun. And in the world where there's nothing new under the sun, choose to change the sun means that we've been heading towards the wrong ideal all the time, or for a long time, and we need to choose a new ideal. And if we can get a new ideal to aim for, maybe we can finally have novelty again, and a healthier novelty, and that we've been distracted by these artificial lights, so to speak. Seems really, really pertinent to me. And I think this is probably the most impactful page for me in the book. It's like further letting me unpack my own metaphors in a way. And it seems to be like pretty explicit intention, but Lord knows I could be reading all kinds of things in this. And then this is another one that I really, really think made a lot of sense to me given my current ongoing unpacking of this tree metaphor. And again, I don't know if this is how Scott meant it. Now go join the disembarked and rebark them. So these people who have disembarked from this ship and rebark them, like bring them back onto the ship. But also I was thinking about that, like, from the tree metaphor, like you've been disembarked, you've had your bark removed, you've had your skin removed in a sense, and society maybe has gotten too raw and we need to rebark and relook at the tree and allow the bark to grow again. I don't know if that's what Scott means, but like this character says rebark, and he says at the appointed hour this riddle will also fall from your knotted head to your mangy breast. And that's a really interesting thing because it's talking about like you can understand it intellectually, but until it impacts you emotionally, it's not going to land. And that's like talking about the struggle that I had with like, why do we need stories and metaphors? Why can't we just be told things? Like, why are we so childish? And it's like, well, and then I actually lived through an experience where something I knew intellectually had to land emotionally for it to land. I was like, okay, well, that's why you do it, because we're just story bound creatures, and that may be childish, but if we went to a totally explicit scientific world, that would just be the artificial intelligence or whatever, something that's completely non-emotive. And so you have to have the rhetoric to sell the knowledge, and that's what they're talking about here. And that seems to be what this book is doing, what it's intended to do. It's allowing me to have a metaphorical emotional experience that's allow me to continue to unpack my own kind of metaphors that I've been building, which is a really strange thing to get in the mail. When the light has gone fluorescent and constant, when rhythm and variation have departed your flat song, this device lets the darkness in. It assaults the feline predatory machine of the airtight built environment, dims the sunlight, and beckons the moon to dance again. It is everything you asked for and much more. So it's saying in too of a sterile environment, there's too much order. You need something to reintroduce chaos to liven things up. This feels very much to me like how I've always understood Foucault and Derrida's. Foucault is saying basically you're always trapped inside of a box and you can't get out of it because you can't see the box from the inside, and not being able to see it from the inside, you don't know how to break it. Like you don't know the rules of the episteme that you're in, and so you don't know how to break it. And I feel like Derrida is a response to that, where he comes up with a strategy where you can't know the tools outside of the box, but you can know the tools inside of the box, and you can see how they could explode the box from inside. That seems to me like what Derrida is up to philosophically, and I find that to be a very dangerous strategy because you don't know what's outside of the box. So the box might be better than what's outside, but I do think like that is, to get outside of it, you got to totally tear it apart from the inside. I think that's kind of one of the battles going on in our society. I'm on, but to me, that's again that linear progression. It's not looking at constant refinement. It's just looking at like break through the barrier and try the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. But like Foucault says, you're always inside of a box. And my favorite quote about that is from the rapper MC Paul Barman: "If you think outside the box, you're stuck in one." And so this idea of smashing the boxes, intentionally letting in too much chaos, I don't think is the greatest idea, but pretty sure that's what that page represents. Here's just some more of these really awesome, like collective, subconscious, psychedelic type of images here. You really, really wish you could see these things in color, but you get why this book is in black and white. And here at the end of the book, you realize that this ark that they've been on the whole time is a metaphor for Noah's Ark. So they're rebarking all the animals. They're getting all the animals on there, getting them back on the right view of progression, I think. And they kind of have this breakthrough moment. But in the end sequence, you get the sense that nothing changes. And I don't want to, I guess I'm giving spoiler alerts here, but this is a book that I really want to engage with the content all the way through, my interpretation of it. So he says, what course should we plot? Not a course, a whole curriculum. And I like that because it's speaking to the idea that it's, again, not a course. It's not a path to follow, but it's a curriculum of learning. And as I'm thinking about how do we teach these kids in the face of AI and all of that stuff, that we really need to rethink our entire curriculum for humanity and refocus what it is we're trying to learn and what it is we're trying to teach. And then it says, the 7 stories of the sun, trademark, were just the first rung of the ladder. Let's see what else we can see. When all our oars catch rhythm, the sailing will be smooth. So this is the current sun that we're under. There's been 7 stories that we've had to learn from, and it seems like the rebarking of the tree is maybe the last one we need to move on to the next rung of the ladder. And there could be kind of an infinite rung of ladders. And you get these characters, then they like break on through to the other side. You can see now that they've passed the crescent of the moon, and it's not 2-dimensional anymore. It's like 3-dimensional, and they have an anchor. They talk about anchors a lot, which is great because I feel like a lot of people are unmoored these days. They don't have an anchor. And as they push through and the sun becomes 3-dimensional, they pass the 2-dimensional boundary into the next dimension or whatever. They're just put into another jar, and you get the sense that, like I said, this is a cyclical story that starts over. So they've moved on to the next rung of the ladder, but it's really probably going to be a repetition of kind of the same cycles, just seen as under the light of a new sun. So you would have, if you change the sun, maybe all the shadows change, but all of the things that it's projecting on are going to be the same, and we'll have to learn new lessons. And I think that's what the end of the book is, and that's where I feel like if I cycle back to the beginning, you have this dog kind of being pushed through here, and you have this old, decayed, beat up boat. And I would have to go back and reread this, because when I first read it, it was, I hadn't got a latch onto the book yet, and that's why I feel like this book has to be read cyclically. And I think that's intentional. I think that's saying that life has this cyclical nature. We have to relearn the same lessons over and over again. So this really, really feels to me like Scott Finch got a download of some kind of deep occult wisdom, or he has very, very carefully and intentionally been thinking about these things for a very long time. And I really, really appreciate this book because it's another one of these things that's just coming to me at the exact right moment for all of the thoughts I've been having for the last 20 years. And as I'm like, I feel like I pushed through that bottleneck, and now I'm like blossoming out on the other side, and my tree is like finally rebarking, and this is really helping me. Like now I have more of that language. I could say, oh, I'm rebarking. And yeah, I had no idea when Scott reached out, because when someone reached out and said, hey, well, you look at my comic here, I was like, yeah, of course I'll check it out, but like, it could be great, it could just be, whatever. This obviously really, really took me off guard and really, really spoke to me. So thank you so much, Scott. If you enjoy what we're doing here on the channel, there's 2 ways to support us. The first one is through our Patreon. On Patreon, we have 2 different tiers of engagement. The first one's basically like access to all of our videos and early access. A lot of them are sitting there for months before they get posted. Then the second tier, you can get exclusive access to our story Pronade, which is an ongoing interactive webcomic where the votes of the people in the second tier help form what happens with the story. So you get those kind of voting rights as well. And then exclusive access to early previews of what Sean and I are working on. Any of the money that we get on Patreon just goes to help us buying the books that we review. So that money just goes back into the pockets of other creators, and that helps us be able to keep exposing you all to cool new stuff like Scott Finch's stuff. Luckily, people are starting to send us stuff too, so that helps quite a bit. And then the best way to support Living the Line is to support what Sean's doing with Living the Line Publishing. So we'll go ahead and take a look at one of his products now.
Whole new world. 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 For you and
Thanks for following along. Take it away, Jack.